I'm here with Lucy Shaw, our fantastic Labour and Cooperative Councillor for St Helens Ward in North Kensington. We're at the beautiful West London Bowling Club. Lucy was elected in May 2026. And Lucy, why did you decide to get involved in politics?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I got involved in politics because of really where I started my career, which is in the private sector. So I worked as a mechanical engineer in the energy industry. I've worked on business initiatives in energy. I've even worked in international development on energy projects in rural areas, and most recently as an investor on very large scale projects in the UK and Europe. And what I found in all of these roles is that in making sure that private investment works for people and makes their lives better, government had such a huge role to play. That's not just on the politics of climate and making sure that we're meeting our commitments as a nation on climate policy and pulling our weight in international negotiations, but also on making sure that energy investments lower bills for people, make their lives better, make the air cleaner. I felt like government and political action as part of government was essential to making sure that energy works for people.
And you're now obviously in local government. What is it that you think local government can do to support the energy transition and to tackle climate change?
Yeah, so I think there's a perception that energy is only a national issue, but actually at the last mile of delivery, local government is so important. And that's because local government has a role to play in planning permission, for example. So in Kensington and Chelsea, they're one of the leading boroughs on allowing rooftop solar to be built in conservation areas. So there's permission that means you are allowed to install actually rooftop solar in areas that we typically don't think of as being permissive on planning. So leading London in that regard. But it hasn't yet translated into widespread rooftop solar adoption in the borough. And
so how do you think Kensington and Chelsea Council is doing in this area?
Yeah, on climate, Kensington and Chelsea Council actually did commit to a net zero pledge by 2030. For the council's own operations, and a net zero pledge by 2040 in the entire borough, which I think is great. And I think the main problem there is on delivery. So the council's had quite ambitious goals. They've been able to benefit from government funding to upgrade heat networks. They've installed solar panels on the rooftop of the main Kensington Town Hall council buildings, but it hasn't yet translated into being on track to meet their emissions reduction targets for 2030. And certainly borough-wide, we're quite off track for meeting those targets.
One of the things I've actually been frustrated about is the planning process for new solar on public buildings. Seems like the community energy movement would like to see a bit more kind of speed in terms of assessing what roofs are adaptable and fire risk and all the rest of it. But I guess my last question was, how do you see local and national government and even the regional London GLA and the mayor, how can they all work together better to actually deliver some of the things you're talking about?
Yeah, so I think I'll give three different examples. One is on rooftop solar. So Kensington's made planning for that easier for households to install, but the government nationally could be helpful in coordinating with financing schemes so that people who own their own homes can find the funds to install those solar panels. Kensington's a unique borough in that 2/3 of people rent, and so there needs to be coordination with social housing and even with landlords in financing rooftop solar schemes, and that kind of pressure can come from the national government as well as being supported by local policies. On EV charging, for example, Kensington and Chelsea has the highest street parking rate in London at 80%, and if we want to transition another 90% of our 40,000 vehicles in this borough to being electric, we need a lot more emphasis on public EV charging. There's loads of funding available to install it, but the pricing for that is still unequal between homes and public charging. And you can improve that if we change policies around business procurement of energy, if you change policies around VAT, if you make it easier to designate parking as EV zones. And then the third one I'd highlight is heating. And so the council's already made a lot of investments in electrifying heating and in council buildings. For heat pumps at home and even for the council's own properties, the disparity between electricity and gas prices has made it quite difficult on an operational perspective to mean that you actually save money
Yeah.
from doing the carbon
Sure.
friendly
Yeah.
right option. And so the government's already taken steps to address the ratio between electricity and gas
Yeah.
prices. And that's one way that they nationally could support more investment locally in decarbonising heat, decarbonising transport, and even decarbonising the electricity system.
Thank you so much, Lucy. That was really interesting. How can people get in touch with you or follow your work as you kind of take forward some of these areas in the council?
Yeah, so I'd love to hear people's ideas if they write to me at my councillor email, cllr.lucy.shaw@rbkc.gov.uk. You can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter, X, at Lucy F. Shaw. And you can sign up to our newsletter at kensingtonlabour.org.uk to hear updates from the St Helens ward and also from the wider Kensington and Chelsea Labour group.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lucy.